me about 8 minutes.
I made it! Hey, I did too. Come on. Hurry up. Okay, here I go. Come on, let's go. Okay, I got it. Okay, my turn.
Damn, what is she in there cooking is what I'm thinking.
Okay, here we go. Ah, you're wrong. I did it. Come on, let's go.
As I'm sitting on the couch looking. In the kitchen cooking my favorite dish. Fettuccine with Alfredo sauce and a little bit of crawfish.
Maybe we could watch a movie tonight before we put the kids to bed. A joyous evening at home always allows me to clear my head.
Come on, let's go. Okay, I got it. Okay, my turn.
I'll be right back. I'm about to go to the store to get some diapers and distilled water. Keep your hands on the steering wheel of the car. Are you carrying a weapon on you? I know a lot of you are. He snatches me and slams me to the ground because my nose is wide and my skin is brown.
It's been some time since he left the house, and I have to change her out of this diaper. Maybe a snack will calm the kids down. Maybe it'll make them hyper. And I have this report due tonight. If I get an hour, I'll be done. He has to come back now. There's still laundry I need to fold. It's getting really late, and it's dangerous for him on the road.
Now I'm in the backseat handcuffed like a misfit because I fit the description of a suspect who's suspected of being the suspect, who's black like me.
It's been hours, literally hours. Getting diapers don't take this long. I mean, I know I'm only panicking, but why won't my baby pick up the phone? I swear, if he's not here in 20 minutes, I'm heading out. But who's gonna watch the kids? I'll have to figure that out.
I'm sitting in intake as they take my fingerprints and mug shot. They throw me in the cell. One phone, 40 people, all trying to make bail or call home.
How did you get arrested?
They pulled me over for my taillight being broke. There's some parking tickets. This is a fucking joke.
Are you serious?
And my bail is $22,000. This was not in the game plan. How much do we have in our savings account?
Not that amount. I need to call the bail bondsman.
Okay, I'll call my job and tell them I'm out sick. I walk into the unit with my rolled up mattress. I look around. Can't help but notice all the blackness.
If you don't have the money, you will sit there till you see the judge.
I'm calling the bondsman, and I can't believe what I just heard.
Set so high, you're not gonna get
It'll
out.
be $2,200 down.
What? That's absurd. Well, do you really think we just have that kind of money to pay?
I think if you really want it, you'll try to make a way. Perhaps call some family. Get on the phone today.
Can we at least do a payment plan?
It'll be $2,200 down, ma'am.
Look, I need to bail out so I can get the hell out of this cell. I'm about to lose my car, my house, my job. That's all I have in a nutshell.
Hello? Aunt Tammy? I don't really know where to start.
I need a loan.
Hey, Cousin Leah.
I need a loan.
I need a loan if you can. Ty's job. I have to make this call. I don't really know where to start. So what you're saying is there's nothing we can really do at all? Our family needs this job. He'll return soon, feeling much better. Please don't fire my love. He's only under the weather.
I dialed my wife again.
Your job was just on the phone.
Wait, what they say?
They said one more day is too long.
Really?
It's already been a week. They say they can't hold your position and they have to move on.
Day 10. Now I'm on the phone with a bail bondsman.
I want to help you, friend. How much is your freedom worth? Now, do you comprehend?
My freedom is worth everything.
You want to stay in jail or you want to go home like me?
I understand. I'll find the money and call you tomorrow around 3.
I'm doing everything for bail, and the bondsman keeps calling. The concern for cash over our lives is appalling. Hey, Danielle.
Hey there, girlfriend. How
I know
you
we
doing?
haven't spoken in a while.
Oh,
Hi, good to hear from you too.
we're short ourselves.
I have a question to ask Kyle.
Oh, no, I wish we could. You know.
Hey, how are the kids?
Oh, well, how are you?
I'm coming to get them later.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I wish I could help you out.
I really appreciate you, Mom, but I need another favor.
I'm trying to think to myself, who could give me a loan? Her mother answers.
When are you coming home?
Mom, I hate to ask, but I need a loan.
The bondsman called me, so we made an agreement.
What was the agreement?
I use the house as collateral, and we make payments of $250 a month.
Maybe I'm too exhausted to cry, but I'm so thankful for these funds. I barely had $20. Borrowing $2,200 ain't no fun. So we can't get the kids to school if we can't afford to get out our car. I may have enough dollars to get us all on the bus tomorrow.
Finally, I'm at home, but it's hard to celebrate in this space. I mean, thousands of dollars down the drain, even though the DA dismissed my case. No car, no job. I mean, I'm free and the charges were dropped, but that $250 monthly payment to the bail bondsman won't stop.
I guess we're supposed to celebrate, but it don't feel like we're in heaven. The only thing left we have is our precious children and the rest of the payments to the bondsman.
Thank you. We can get our panelists up here, and I'll turn on the lights. Well, good morning. Thank you all for being here. We are going to start by doing introductions. One of the ways I like to do introductions is I would like to go down the line of the panelists. And each one, I want your name, your organization, affiliation, and how your field correlates with bail reform. And then I want, give me something interesting about yourself that nobody may know looking at you, or who are just like, you know, acquaintances. So give me something interesting. And we'll start with Shelby.
Okay. It's gonna be hard to think of something off the top of my head, but so I'm Shelby McNabb. I was a UCLA grad student in the public policy department, and we do a capstone project every year. And I worked on the bail reform campaign with Shelby King. So we worked for Assemblymember Bonta, who introduced legislation to reform the bail system in California. So what we did was we analyzed the current bail system and evaluated alternatives to that system. So that's my affiliation here. Something interesting. I don't.
You have a secret hidden activity you like to do?
I like to knit. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I am also Shelby, and I'm a current law student and Master of Public Policy student here at UCLA. I was part of other Shelby's capstone project on bail. I've also worked, I wrote a paper on why the Judicial Council, which is the agency that oversees the judicial branch in California, should support the bail bill, because at the beginning of the legislative process, they were not on either side. And so my paper was just sort of trying to influence them to jump on board. And I was also in a criminal justice reform clinic at UCLA, and we looked at bail contracts just to see what's in the contracts, what's bad about the contracts, surprise, everything. And fun fact, I'm also working at externing at the Ventura Public Defender's Office, and I'm helping them with their bail challenges, which is exciting. And fun fact, so everything I do is like law and criminal justice, but on the side I run a nonprofit music program in Arizona for low-income kids, which is like my passion project that I really love doing.
All right, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eddie Anderson. I am the regional organizer for LA Voice, which is the PICO affiliate, PICO California affiliate. My work surrounds around a couple of things and affiliations. I'm part of the Justice Not Jails Coalition, which is a coalition made up of Dignity and Power Now, Black Lives Matter, PICO, ACLU, and Community Coalition, and we are trying to stop mass incarceration. My PICO work, I work with a group of folks, ACLU, SEIU, Betsy Center, doing SB 10 lobbying and legislative visits to try to push it through. And we talk about what is the moral call for us not to have a bail system. And fun fact, I am from Atlanta, Georgia.
Good to have you here.
My name's Michael Wu. I'm the programs director at Brave New Films, and we make films, as our name suggests. We make a variety of feature-length and short film documentaries on social justice issues, including the film you guys saw today, which is called How Much Is Your Freedom Worth, and is part of a series on bail that we've released throughout last year and this year, a series of 4 short films that we made in conjunction with Californians for Safety and Justice, the Pretrial Justice Institute, and we've released with the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights and the ACLU of California, just to spread awareness about the issue of money bail in this state and to highlight the efforts that are going on throughout the state to reform that system. And I guess fun fact for me, I can tie a bow tie with my eyes closed.
Hey. All right. It's good to have everybody here. Michael, the first question for you. This is one of the movies from Brave New Films. Can you go ahead and give us some content to the film? Who made it? Who made it? Why did you make it? And anything else that you feel.
So all our films are directed by our founder and president, Robert Greenwald. He had a career in the commercial film industry, and around the early 2000s, he started having a passion for making documentaries about issues that were being underreported and that weren't necessarily talked about. And through that work, our organization has identified mass incarceration issues as something that we're really passionate about. And in that work, we discovered, well, not that it needed any discovery, but we discovered how serious of an issue money bail was, and the problems that it creates, and how it's this for-profit system throughout the country that's unregulated, and really takes advantage of people who are living on low incomes and really traps them in this sort of never-ending process of debt. And also looking at how it disproportionately affects communities of color. We started to, along with the movements happening in California, realize that the main hurdle that we saw was that people don't know what bail is. You watch Law and Order and you hear like somebody got out on bail, and you just assume that money is part of the process, and that's just the way the system is set up. But what we discovered, right, is that bail is essentially an agreement with the court that an accused person will return to their court date, and money got involved as a way of ensuring that. And it's become this perversion of what the Eighth Amendment lays out, that, you know, it should not be excessive. And then the question of like who determines what is excessive started to come up, and our organization is always really interested in who's profiting off of particular injustice out of a particular system. And we discovered, you know, the way that private bail bondsmen work and their associations with private insurance companies, that there's really profit is driving the system rather than really ensuring that people come back to court. And in working with organizations like the Pretrial Justice Institute and Californians for Safety and Justice, we started to learn how it really isn't particularly more effective than a text message reminder or a phone call reminder, like you'd get, you know, through your bank app to pay your bills on time. That people essentially, they're not looking for ways not to come to court. It's just life gets in the way for a lot of people, and starting to start that discussion of how do we make this more just, and how do we, where are the cracks in this system right now? I hope that answers the
Yes,
question.
yes, thank you. And then you have more than one film on
Yes.
reform?
So this series is a four-part series. The other films in that series, the first film is called Breaking Down Bail Myths, which is a short video that kind of goes through common misconceptions that people have about bail and about how the system works. For instance, you know, most people don't know that even if you're proven innocent, if you signed a contract with a bail bondsman, you're still obligated to pay that bail amount. Whatever you agree, the contract lays out 10%, 8%, and 20%. That you're still obligated to pay that, and then it becomes, you know, an offense if you're unable to pay it, and then it reverts back to the total bail amount in many cases. The second film in the series is called Ty Story, College or Bail, and it follows a young woman in Oakland and her mother. She gets caught up for a first-time offense and is charged with a $100,000 bail. And we kind of follow them as they try to balance keeping the water running, and does Ty go to school? Does she go to college? Or do we pay off this bail? And luckily, through that partnership, they were actually able to link up with the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, who started a fund for them in order to pay off Ty's entire bail amount. Spoiler alert. The third film in this series is called Deal with the Devil, and it kind of goes into the issue of how a lot of people who are held in jail on bail without being charged or without being convicted of any crime yet often get pushed into taking really bad plea deals, and how that their inability to pay bail and their desire to get out and reconnect with their families and reconnect with their lives is often used as a tactic to get them to take a guilty plea, whether they're guilty or not, and without knowing the long-lasting permanent impacts that has on your life after you're released. And then the final film is this film. And altogether, the series is about 35 minutes. We make them available for free to screen in homes, through organizations at churches, at mosques and temples. libraries, wherever advocates can show them to people, gather a group of people together to discuss the issue and to spread awareness about it. I guess now's the time for me to plug that. If you'd like to screen this film, which we highly encourage, not as a way of fixing bail, but fixing the system, but to get that conversation started in your community or through your organization. I have a sign-up sheet so you can find me afterwards. To screen that film, along with our films, we create discussion guides that give some background information on the issue, some facts that you can kind of start discussions with, and suggested discussion questions and actions. And so far, throughout the state of California, we've screened over in about 100 different venues, whether house parties or in large theaters. And we've been happy to work with the ACLU and Bend the Arc, who are really passionate about this issue, to connect their chapters with this series, so that really we see it as a tool to just get people in a room. If you say, oh, we're going to have a film screening, and while you're here, we're going to have a workshop on bail reform, we feel like it's a great way to draw people in and really get talking and start teaching people about how to take action on the issue.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question is for Eddie. Eddie, can you're a man of the community. You certainly hear the voice of community members, so those who are most affected by the current bail system. Can you describe the inequalities that the bail system has on the community that you serve?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to the panel. I'm glad to meet all of you. The bail system is unjust because it criminalizes poverty. When I say poverty, I'm not saying like you don't make any money. I mean poverty as in the poverty line in LA is $53,000. And so because we don't have a bail schedule, a set bail schedule, we are criminalizing people who are working every day the hardest they can. You saw in the film that the man was like, I'm gonna lose my job, my car, I'm not gonna pay my bills. It has a residual effect on your entire life. And so how can you call that system just if what you're doing is basically taking a community of people, criminalizing them, and then making them objects for the system to make profit off of? That's not right. And when I go and work with people on the streets, whether I'm at a Black Lives Matter protest or if I'm at the state capitol talking to people, I ask them, if you have to make a decision between your freedom or eating, people are going to pick their freedom. And then that's going to put you into a system of debt where you're going to have to pay your $20, $50 a month plus interest for X number of years, and that means that you're going without. And you've already are trying your best to just afford rent. I mean, rent is 60% of most people's income in LA. And so when they tell you that you have to pay bail, it just makes you another stress on your life. Now, this is why it's unjust, because if you can pay the entire bill, so when Lindsay Lohan goes to jail, right, she could just pay the entire amount, get out, and then go to a court case, and then she passes her court case, she gets the money back. Well, that doesn't work for people in my neighborhood, right? If African Americans are 8% of the population in Los Angeles and are 31% of the jail system, I mean, statistically, that's not right. That means that you are statistically criminalizing people. If you add black and brown people, that's 51% of the jail population. Or black and brown folks who can't afford to get out, and sometimes they didn't do anything in the first place. And so where is the justice in that? And in my tradition, I'm a Christian pastor. I mean, the person that I follow is Jesus. And Jesus told me that the Spirit is on us to, set the captives free, to bring justice to the poor, not to criminalize them, not to say, oh, you made a mistake and now you're in the system and now you won't be able to get a job, hold a job, a permanent job, and your family is now relegated to the margins even further than they already were. And so that's what I hear. People are frustrated because if you don't have a bail schedule, if you don't have bail that is proportionate to your income, and then you have really just regulated people and are erasing and locking up folks for profit. I'll say the last thing. A part of the Justice Not Jails Coalition, the county of Los Angeles just wanted to build a $3.5 billion jail. $3.5 billion. If you add in all the construction costs and final taxes and stuff, that's $7 billion to build a jail. It would be the biggest mental facility that we have in California, right? And the question is, what about the unborn babies? Because if you build the jail, you have to fill the jail. And how are you going to fill the jail? You're going to fill the jail by holding people who can't pay bail so that you can line the pockets of private prisons. And so, where's the justice in that? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. Where's the justice? Where's the freedom? Where's taking care of the least of these in any of that?
Thank you. Thank you. Next question is for Shelby McNabb. Hi. So you got to contribute to AB 42. And so my question for you is, one, can you describe the current bail system? And then the other part of the question is, how is AB 42 different from SB 10?
Okay. Yeah, so I think hopefully after watching this video, I think it did a good job of explaining how bail works. I'll just share a couple more details. So once you're arrested and booked into jail, you'll be given your bail amount, and it's usually based off of a bail schedule, which is predetermined every year by judges in your county based off the seriousness of your offense. But it's essentially random because it varies so much between counties. So if you're booked in Los Angeles County for the same exact crime, your bail might be $50,000. In another county, it might be $10,000. So that weighs really heavily on whether or not you're going to be released, and that's something that's so random, essentially. So then, once you're given your bail amount, as Eddie mentioned, if you have $50,000 laying around, you could pay that to the court, and then if you show up to all your court hearings, then you'll get all of that money back. So that's why it is essentially criminalizing poverty, because if you don't have that $50,000, you're going to have to pay $5,000 to a bail bonds agency, and you're never going to get that money back, even if, like happened in the video, your case was dismissed. So, and $5,000 is still a really significant amount. So if you don't have $50,000 or $5,000, then you're going to wait in jail until your trial, even if you are found innocent. So that's obviously really problematic, and it's biased against people who are low income, and it's also not effective. So if you're just basing off who we're releasing based off of somebody's ability to pay, that has no bearing on public safety. So in the example of the video, that person would have been safe to have been released. So we're paying money as a society to lock somebody up who has no threat to public safety. So it's not a very effective system either. And so AB 42 and Senate Bill 10, they were actually identical bills. And AB 42 did not pass in the Assembly in May, but Senate Bill 10 did pass. And they said the same thing, which was that money bail should be the last resort, and that judges should order least restrictive means of release. So that's either you're just released with a reminder, maybe you have some supervision requirements on you. So it's prioritizing those forms of release. And then it's establishing pretrial services agencies in every county to kind of deal with these new release methods. So that's basically what Senate Bill 10 is doing, and it is moving forward. It passed in the Senate, and maybe you could speak a little bit more to this, but essentially was put on hold for a year by the governor, and it's going to be brought up again next year.
Thank you. Next is for Shelby King. Who's fighting against the implementation of bail reform? And then Also, what will happen with the industry if bail reform becomes active?
Yeah, so there are quite a few groups that are against the legislation, namely law enforcement, probation, district attorneys, victims' rights advocates. But personally, I think that's mostly because of a misunderstanding of what the bill does. A lot of the victims' rights advocates especially, and the DAs and law enforcement are arguing a public safety line, that like getting rid of bail, like who knows what's gonna happen, but public safety is gonna be awful. But that's not really the case. So as Shelby mentioned, the bail schedules are just really arbitrary. So it's supposed to be based on severity of the charge, but like, what does that mean? And even so, if you're basing it off the severity of the charge could be wrong, the person could be innocent, they could be wrongly charged. So for that reason, you're almost presuming guilt at that point before someone's even found guilty. And then also when you're factoring in, so for Penal Code 243B, which is battery on a peace officer, is you would think all counties and judges who are making these bail schedules are like, battery on a peace officer, that's super bad, we're gonna do this like really high bail. It's a misdemeanor charge. So in Merced County, your bail would be $500. In Ventura County, your bill would be $10,000. And in San Joaquin County, your bill would be $50,000. So, like, what does that even tell you? I don't understand. And so they're arguing that that protects public safety more than using a tool which is designed to predict risk of failing to appear and risk of recidivating or committing a new crime while you're out on bail. And then ideally that would be combined with conditions or support to help someone be successful on pretrial release. And so I would like to hear more details from those organizations as to why they think that bail protects public safety, because I'm not convinced. There are also groups that are against the bill because of the cost. So it's going to cost a lot of money to implement the bill, and there are questions about offsetting the costs with reducing the pretrial jail incarceration. Will create a surplus, but like if there's a bed, they will fill it. So there's so many people being released early right now because of jail overcrowding that the jail populations might not actually decrease. If you decrease the pretrial population, it's going to switch to sentence population, which is a problem. And then also the conditions. So you don't want to switch from a system where it's like you have to pay to get out of custody to a system where you have to pay for the ankle monitor, you have to pay for the drug testing, you have to pay for the services and the supervision on pretrial release. So I think in the bill, as it started out, the supervision was free, no cost to the defendant. As it is now, I think it's based on ability to pay. So as long as that's defined appropriately and enforced, there won't be a barrier to pretrial release. And then, so bail agents are obviously against this because they're going to lose a lot of business. So there is a right to bail that's in the California Constitution. In Article 1, Section 12, there's a guarantee. And so the legislation is not amending the Constitution, which requires like a higher vote total or a ballot proposition, which the stakeholders that got this together thought was too risky, wasn't a possibility. They're creating alternatives to bail and decreasing the reliance on bail. So bail is sort of like the last resort in how the bill is written. So they're going to lose a lot of business, but bail will still be an option.
Thank you. I'm going to shift my questions over to Michael. Michael, doing the films, you've had to come across people who've been adversely affected by the current bail system. Mm-hmm. Can you describe a moment where you just like, you know what, this is time. It is time to, we need this reform, either through your conversations with those who you film mm-hmm. or interview for your films?
I mean, I think that moment happened in the conception of the films.
Okay.
But where it really kind of crystallized for me. So in the work that I do at Brave New Films, I'm not involved in the production of the films. We have a whole production team for that. But I tend to deal with the groups and individuals who want to show the films and use them. And part of that has been working with people who have appeared in the films to speak at panels and to speak at conferences. So one of the films that I mentioned about the young woman and her mother in Oakland, the mother, Tracy, she's become like extremely impassioned about this issue, and she was already an advocate for a lot of issues, but because this issue hit home with her daughter and has affected her throughout her family, it really crystallized for her. And I was with her at a conference in San Francisco, and one of the videos we showed, there was like 30 seconds of footage of Khalif Browder. And if you're not familiar with the Khalif Browder case, he was a young man who was held in jail on bail for an extended period of time, and once he was finally released, the psychological damage that was done to him like pushed him to commit suicide. And at that point, he had been speaking out about bail, and it really hit a lot of people hard. And when Tracy saw that, she got really impassioned at this panel that we were speaking on, because it became it's personal for her. Like, that could have been her daughter if they weren't lucky enough to have family who was willing to give up money that they couldn't give up, or willing to forego getting dental surgery that they needed in order to pay her bail. Her daughter, that could have been her daughter. Her daughter could be still in jail. Her daughter could have taken her own life, or something else could have happened to her. And that really crystallized it for me, that not being personally affected by it, it can be easy to see how, like, well, this is going to cost a lot of money, or what's going to replace this, and how much is that going to cost? But at the end of the day, it's costing people their lives in many instances. It's costing people their futures. It's hurting their families. And that really hit home in that moment for me. Just knowing that here's a woman who is standing up for this, but she's still kind of the lingering effects of it are still affecting her life.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Eddie. Can you go ahead and give me what is the current climate like in the community towards bail, the way it is, the bail reform, and how do you activate the social capital available to you? How do you mobilize?
The climate is that it needs to change. Once people find out, about how the bail system is set up, they say it needs to change. And then some people have asked the question, well, what happens to all the bail bondsmen? It's not like a mom and pop business. It's like, no, they're backed by big insurance companies, and yeah, they'll lose their jobs, but I'm not really sad about that, because when we abolished slavery, plantation owners lost their jobs too, and so that's totally fine for freedom. And so that's what I kind of tell people, because the system is very, very skewed. It's designed and is working properly because it's supposed to imprison folks, but it's skewed and it's not just. And so I think there's a big push for people who are feeling the effects of it to reform the system. Shelby mentioned SB 10. That's one way that we're mobilizing folks through the legislative branch to try to get folks to go up and legislate. Call your local assembly person, because we need the assembly vote. Call your local assembly person and say, I support bail reform. The governor, the chief justice, and Bob Hertzberg, the author of the bill, have agreed to work together. So call and say, like, don't gut the bill, don't make it weak. People are saying, the bail lobbyists are really trying to push for folks not to do it. And then how to use your social capital. I'll tell you an experience. About 3 weeks ago, I was talking about this prison, $3.5 billion. And when the county passed the measure that they wanted to build this prison, they mentioned beds like 1,300 times and the reason why they need it, because we need more beds. We need more beds. And so the coalition got together, and Patrice and others had this great idea. We should take the beds to them. And so what we did was we got 100 replicas of prison beds, exactly replicas of prison beds, and we delivered them in front of the Board of Supervisors meeting. And so just imagine driving down Grand Avenue, and there's 100 beds in the middle of the street. And then we went inside and gave them a motion and said, let's put a moratorium on jails, because we've already done realignment in California. We've passed Prop 4757, AB 109, to say, all right, we need to release some folks who are not quote-unquote violent offenders. We need to assess how we're holding people. And so if we haven't even given the law time to work, why would we build more prisons? Why would we be against bail reform? Who is really profiting, and who are you listening to? Are you listening to the corporations, or are you listening to the people? Because we thought that you serve the people. And how can you serve the people if you just keep locking them up, right? If you're not investing in schools, if you're not investing in public parks, if you're not investing in fine arts programs. And so we all have a voice, and I encourage you to use your voice. Call your legislator, show up to a protest, show up to a rally. If you can't do those things, then write a check to organizations that are doing those things, because we need all hands on deck to make sure that this system is changed and that our people are not suffering and are in pain any longer.
Thank you. Quick funny story. Those beds, when you went to the welder and said, hey, we need to have these beds for a movie production. So they were made under the guise of having a movie production. But what's even more, what makes the story even better, one of the welders is formerly incarcerated. And so I found that out. I knew the beds were being built long before they hit the street.
Yeah.
And so when I saw it on there, and I'm looking at Facebook Live, I'm like, oh, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. You know, my folks are at work, and so I'm very happy to see that. And thank you for that. My next question is for Shelby McNabb. Some would say that there's already the OR system, recognizance in place. How is Bell different from that? And yeah, just how is it different?
Yeah, so everything most things that are proposed in SB 10 already do happen to some degree. So for example, you could be released on your own recognizance in our current system. It's just not utilized that much. Not that many people are released on their own recognizance, and that just means you're just let go with a reminder to come to your court hearing. And so basically what SB 10 would do is it would prioritize that form of release. It would instruct judges to release people on OR for a certain number of charges, and in almost all, hopefully in almost all scenarios, people would just be released on OR. And so, yeah, it's basically the bill, it's already happening, and we already have pretrial services agencies as well. And it's just not in every single county. So the bill would mandate that every single county has one, that every single county starts to use this. And in counties that do it, or states that do this really successfully, so for example, DC has implemented bail reform, and they use a risk assessment tool to assess people's risk, and they release about 90% of their defendants on OR. So they're just letting 90% of people go, and they're not seeing an increase in rearrest. They're not seeing an increase in people failing to appear to court. So that just tells you that, there's a lot of other states who have implemented these reforms and have seen the exact same results. So that just tells you that we can be releasing more people than we are, and the reason that we're not is basically just to fill a useless system that's making profit.
Thank you. Shelby King. So the So those of us who have lobbied on, I've seen some folks in here who have lobbied before. We know that Governor Brown doesn't necessarily like to sign bills that have a huge fiscal impact. So he's progressive in trying to implement laws, but when it comes to it coming out of the state's budget, he's not so keen on that. So, so will counties need to implement an infrastructure, or is there a system already in place?
Yes, so there sort of is already a system in place. Californians for Safety and Justice did a really great report in August of 2015 that studied the existing infrastructure. And so I have some facts. So 46 of the 58 counties in California have pretrial programs. And you brought up realignment. So 70% of those pretrial programs were established between 2010 and 2015, which is about when realignment was enacted. And so that shifted certain charges from state prison to county jails. And so there was overcrowding in county jails. And so I'm not implying causation, because you shouldn't imply causation, but pretrial programs were also established during that time period. So 91% of those counties already use a risk assessment tool, which is what the bill is going to mandate. And 85% of those provide supervision. So the supervision could be drug testing, court date reminders, referrals to community programs, and electronic monitoring. I think they have minimal infrastructure, those facts being said, and the bill will require those counties to bring that up to best practices. It's also going to establish sort of an agency to oversee all the pretrial agencies. And so there's going to be costs for expanding it so that you're able to screen everybody, expanding it to all the counties, using a risk assessment tool that's hopefully unbiased, and looking at different supervision. So like GPS monitoring is not great because the man's watching you. And like drug testing, if you have an existing drug problem, it could just get you into more trouble. But like court date reminders are the key, because there's not very many willful failure to appears. I forgot it, I couldn't get on a bus, I didn't have money to get to court. Things like that, so just supporting people. And so that will also cost money, so it's gonna be expensive, but for me it's like what you said. Are we gonna spend that money, or are we gonna let people continue to suffer and lose their jobs, lose their families, lose their houses, lose their kids? So I think it's really gonna come down to Governor Brown, what do you think is worth it? Because it is gonna be expensive.
Thank you. I'll add to that. Currently, when folks are released, we are forced to sign a bail contract. I myself had signed a bail contract, and then got put on a payment plan. So I put 3% down, which I had to borrow, and then once I was released, I had to go in there and sign the contract, and be able to set up a payment plan, and then my charges were ultimately dismissed. So I have a personal experience of like spending all that money and then like not getting any of it back, even though I was, before I even hit trial, that the judge says this case is bogus, you need to go ahead and throw it out. What are in those bail contracts?
So in the clinic that I was a part of, we looked at over 400 bail bond company websites across California, and then we looked to see if they had contract documents online that we could review, and very few of them do. We went through, I think, a little over 100 contract documents to sort of read through them line by line, which is a lot, to see what's in them, and we identified 20 pretty serious issues. One of those issues is that there's a per annum clause in some contracts. So when you sign a bail contract, it's generally for about 10% of your bail amount. So like in the movie, his bail was $22,000, and so the bail bond company says you need to find $2,200, so that's 10% of $22,000. But if your case goes longer than a year, sometimes they will charge you that 10% or 8 to 10% again. So if your case is if you're charged with a serious felony, you have a really high bail amount. Your case goes on for more than a year, and you miss that 2 little words per annum, which who even knows what that means if you don't have like a legal dictionary or something. You could be paying that again unless you want to be remanded to jail. Another problem is that if you have a private attorney, which is expensive, you get a lower bail rate with some bail agencies. So if I have a private attorney, I would be paying 8% of my bail amount, which I don't know what 8% of 22,000 is. But if I don't have a private attorney, if I have a public defender, I'm paying 10%, which does not exactly make sense. Another issue, so there's an issue where if I am unable to pay my bail amount and I get my mom or my whoever to pay the bail amount, they're called an indemnitor, sort of like a cosigner on the contract. If I violate a condition of my bail contract, my loved one, whoever helped me sign this, could be forced to return me to custody, which is not something that anybody wants to do, especially if you're co-signing and paying on this. It's hugely intrusive, and so the contracts, you could be agreeing to have GPS tracking on you, GPS tracking on your car. The bail agent can enter your home, your car without notice at any time. And this includes conditions not only on the defendant that's on the bail contract, but also the cosigner and indemnitor. So it's like pretty serious intrusion. And the last one I will leave you with is some of the contracts actually required you to have force used against you. So if you violate the conditions, if you flee or something like that, they send someone to get you, and you're consenting that it's okay for them to hurt you, which seems very ridiculous. And so it's just from fees, so like 10%, that doesn't include all the other fees that they charge, intruding on your life and requiring Facebook URLs for background checks and all kinds of stuff. So it's not particularly great. Department of Insurance regulations should do more.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't read the contract, that's for sure. Next question is for Eddie. Eddie, what are the next steps? I mean, you're doing this activism thing, and you know we saw the beds out in the streets, all over the news. We've seen many of us have lobbied, many of us do visits and write and do phone calls. But what are the next steps, especially in regards to bail reform?
So we're gonna continue putting pressure, and thank you for films and writing, because that all helps us when we're in the street. Like, you don't want to get arrested for no reason. Yeah, we are working with legislators in Bob Hertzberg's office to try to figure out what needs to be in the bill. So the ACLU has been very helpful in that capacity in working with organizations and figuring out what do we want to see in the bill and how to make sure the bill stays tight, and that when the amendments start coming that we know what they are and are making those phone calls. That's statewide, how we're doing with bail reform. On a local level, you can expect more protests. And so I would suggest you, if you have a Twitter or Instagram, there's a Justice Not Jails Twitter page, and we will tweet when it's time to mobilize. I won't tell you when we're mobilizing right now because that's going to defeat the purpose of the mobilization. But Justice Not Jails is there's a Twitter page that you can look at, and we can see there. Also, I would suggest that locally, one of the things that we find is like the DA's office can be helpful in moving. So Jackie Lacey is our DA, and I would suggest if you can, there's a petition with Black Lives Matter to hold Jackie Lacey accountable and tell her to do more prosecutions on cops, not our people. And so that's another outlet that you can get involved in. You have cards.
Yes.
He has a friend, Michael, down here has
Yes.
cards from ACU, part of the Coalition for Bail Reform, that we'd love for you to sign up on or be connected to as well. And so those are a couple of ways where you can show up and make your voice and your bodies known and help us start fighting bail reform. Every Tuesday there's we like to call it an action or from turn up, if you will, at the police commission hearings to let them know. She talked about like surveillance. Like, how many of you all know that they want to put like drones in our community, and that most people who are surveyed the most are black folks. Black women are surveyed the most out of everyone else. Like 51% of people are black women. So if they say this all wrapped up in like a larger web of criminal justice. So like, you gotta stay woke and pay attention and not be afraid to call and make our voices known. Oh, and that's like, that's another joke.
All right. Actually, we'll just move over to Michael. Talk about your material. I mean, now that it's brought up, talk about your material.
Yeah, so there's a coalition of organizations throughout the state that are working, that are fully supporting SB 10 and AB 42. And so the governor is in support, as well as the state's Supreme Court justice. But it being delayed for a year can create sort of a malaise with people who are in support of it. So the coalition is really promoting people to continue to keep the voice for this reform alive and well. The SB 10 has to go through the assembly at some point, and it's pretty because AB 42 was a sister bill, because they were identical. It's pretty easy to spot who voted against it in the first place. So one easy way, if you haven't already done so, or to take a postcard and fill in your assembly person's office address and send it out. Today, you can wear these Bail Reform Now stickers and just answer people's questions if they're like, what is bail reform? Why do we need to reform bail? Just to become sort of a light for this movement where it's kind of hazy and people might not be really talking about it. There's also, through this coalition, there's a website, I believe it's bailreformca.org. And you can sign up for their email list. They do monthly by monthly updates on what's going on with the bail reform movement in California. If you want to learn more, they have webinars as well. I learn a ton through it myself. It's bailreformca.org. I believe I always get this wrong, so I hope that's correct.
Bailreform.ca.
No, just ca.org. There it is. And, if you're in Southern California, the ACLU in Southern California is out in full force on this as well. So you can always get linked up with them and find out if they're doing any lobbying efforts and get connected with them as well. Again, you can always sign up to screen the films as well. They're free. Once you have them, you can show them again. You can share them with your friends, share them with your family, share them with your coworkers, share them in your faith communities. Really, I think what Brave New Films, so we are this strange hybrid of an organization that creates films and also does advocacy, but we always lean towards deferring towards the organizations on the ground that are really in there doing the work. And our main objective is to keep that conversation alive and to just keep spreading the awareness of the issue so that people don't forget, that people don't move on to the noise that comes out through the media about what's going on throughout the national, we won't mention his name. But issues like this, bail reform in California is on the cusp, and there is movement behind it, and there's momentum behind it. And the more we keep this issue in the conversation with people in our lives, I think the more when action's being taken, that's just more movement. There's more bodies moving and support and standing behind it.
Thank you, thank you. Shelby McNabb.
Mm-hmm.
When doing the capstone project with Assembly Member Bonta, what were some of the surprising issues that came about? What did you find that just really struck you?
Yeah, I mean, there are some things that I think we would have to be really careful of with the implementation of these new policies. So one thing that was surprising to me is I heard from some people that, this hadn't occurred to me at all, but bail bonds people are doing a lot, they're doing a lot of this emotional labor for defendants that if they're completely abolished and if people are just interacting with the courts, we would have to make sure that the court is really ready to take that on. So, the bail bonds person needs, they're going to be open all night long. They're going to talk to you. They're going to talk to you. They can be really predatory, but they could also be, they're trying to make money off of you and they're going to appear like they're trying to help you. And a lot of times they are really helping you, at least by answering the phone and like letting you cry and like telling you exactly where you need to go and what you need to do and just like supporting family members. So basically the court can be a really hard process to navigate. The pretrial services agency, you can kind of imagine that now you're interacting with this bureaucratic arm and it's not telling you where you need to go and it's not answering the phone and it's like really confusing. So that's kind of one obstacle that I hadn't personally expected, but it's something to keep in mind if we're going to rely more on pretrial services agencies than we are on bail bonds people. Another thing, just really quickly, is just to be really, to monitor the implementation of the risk assessment tool really carefully. So there have been some research studies done. We went to a talk by an investigative journalist at ProPublica who investigated the use of a tool which was basically a racist tool, and it was misclassifying Black people at a much higher rate of being high risk, and at the same time misclassifying white people at a much higher rate of being low risk. And so we don't want this tool to be something that's also used to incarcerate people of color at higher rates. So it shouldn't be used. It shouldn't be used as another way to keep more people in jail. It should be used as a way to release most people. And we just need a lot more research. We need more studies to constantly be done on other tools, because this study only speaks to one tool. So we need to be monitoring the implementation of other tools and making sure that they don't have this racial bias in them. So that's something that these are, issues that we need to keep researching and keep learning about to make sure that they're going to work for good, I guess.
Thank you. Shelby King. Externally for the Ventura County Public Defender's Office, through your experience, who are traditionally more successful at leveraging better outcomes on their pending cases? Those on bail, those in jail, and why?
So for sure, those people that are out of custody have better case outcomes. And it's sort of for three reasons. So first reason is you're better able to prepare for your case. I worked in a pretrial services agency for a summer, and we're asking for references because the judges always like to see that everything that the person told us was verified by an outside source. Try and think of how many numbers you have in your mind right now, phone numbers of people that you could call if you don't have access to your phone or your computer or any papers with you. Can you recall any numbers? It's like cell phones have crippled us of remembering phone numbers. And so if you're in custody, you don't remember the number of the person that can be a witness for you. You don't know how to find a document that proves that you're innocent, and it really debilitates your ability to fight your case. So the second reason is also just in terms of your long term. If you're in custody, you're losing your job. You could, if you have street sweeping on your street and you're parked on the wrong side, your car gets a ticket, your car gets towed. Child custody, your house, your apartment, everything you could lose. And then in the end, you're found innocent, and you're like, okay, well, now I have nothing. And the third way is in terms of mitigating your sentence. So if you are out of custody, you could go to anger management classes, you could go to AA meetings, and then when you have your sentencing hearing, your attorney comes in and they're like, this guy's an upstanding citizen, he's gone to anger management, he has a job, he's enrolled in GED classes, he's done all this stuff. So you should give him a lower sentence so that he can continue on this really great track. But if you're in custody, you can't do those things. Especially even if you're at a jail that offers programming or classes or stuff like that, you're not going to be able to immediately enroll in that, even if you have like a minor charge where you're not in custody for long enough to go through the process of enrolling and participating in these programs in a meaningful way. Whereas if you're out of custody, like, go to the AA meeting tonight, kind of thing. So just in those 3 ways, just being out of custody is hugely beneficial to your case outcome.
Thank you. So I've been asking all these wonderful panelists all these questions. And now that I've done bogarting, I've seen if somebody out into our audience may have questions to ask any of our panelists. So, sure. Erica?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Erica. So in regards to Governor Brown being reticent to spend money, can anyone speak to the anecdotal evidence or maybe even some formal research on the money that would be saved due to bail reform and allowing people to retain their jobs and have an income and not have to face the long-term losses that would come from being incarcerated?
Yeah, well, yeah, we can speak to that. So we've done a fiscal impact assessment, and there, I think Shelby mentioned this a little bit. Theoretically, there would be savings. So it's really expensive to incarcerate somebody. So we kind of calculated. So like we used hypotheticals. Like let's say now under this new legislation, we're releasing 40% of people. Let's say we're releasing 60% of people now. So that's a huge amount of savings that we're not paying anymore to incarcerate people. And it actually does equal out into having this bill be a cost savings bill. The only thing that's problematic that Shelby mentioned is that that's under the assumption that we're not paying for these people in jail anymore. And unfortunately, we have these jails that exist for people to be in them. And it would take a long time to just, because you would have to start closing down jails, basically. We can't just assume that now if we're releasing 60% of people that those beds just go away. We just fire these staff people immediately. So I think that's something that you have to account for, and that's why it is going to cost money. But in the long term, if we get on the right path, obviously of beginning to end mass incarceration and starting to close jails that don't need to be there anymore, then it would be cost savings. Yeah.
Gonna do the social costs?
And there's a lot of social costs as well. Yeah. You don't need the numbers though, but there'd be lots of savings in social costs.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have questions? Philip?
Yes, the question is, let's say if you have somebody who's like currently on bail, this legislation passed, and they're paying their monthly fees, how would they be affected? Would it be something that'd be retroactive and their fees would be given back to them, or how would that process work out?
I think that it likely would not be affected because when you're out on bail, that's a contract with a private company, and the government can't interfere with private contracts. So for that reason, you would probably still owe that money, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any entities that provide bail services other than these bail bonds companies now that sounds like they're just ripping everybody off? Public agencies or nonprofits that can beat the 10% or do something that's not so harmful to the community?
Yeah, there are. So another alternative is something called a community bail fund or a charitable bail fund, and there are organizations that you can donate to who use money to bail out people out of jail, and I think that's really great. I mean, in the long run, though, it's such an I feel like it should be reformed in general because it's such an ineffective system. But yeah, I mean, I know a really cool campaign was like on Mother's Day, they were bailing moms out of jail, on Father's Day, bailing fathers out of jail. There's also organizations that just do it all the time that you can donate to.
Yeah, the national organization, I think it's called National Bailout Day.
The National Bailout Day in LA that was led by Dignity and Power Now, which is the Colors organization, and they bailed out mothers on Mother's Day and fathers on Father's Day, and plan on doing that again as well.
And I think the key with the community bail funds and the bailout day is they're paying the full amount of the bail to the court, so they're getting that money back. So they're not actually engaging like a bail funds company where you're taking like 10% and that money is lost kind of thing. It's sort of like the community's pooling their resources to finally be able to make that full bail payment that's refundable to the court.
Yes.
So for these bail reform measures, what do you say to an abolitionist like myself who thinks we should abolish bail and not reform it? You know, racism doesn't go away, it just changes form. So like what you're saying about the risk assessment tool and the pretrial services, I just feel that these are going to be the bail system in a kinder, gentler form. And it's going to be the same BS. So how do you get someone who sees that as being just as unjust behind these kind of measures?
I would offer this. The goal is to get rid of prisons. Okay, the goal is to do community safety. And we're piecemealing it little by little because we put ourselves in this system. There's a writer, James Foreman Jr., who wrote a book called Locking Up Our Own. And his critique of the criminal justice system was that we had a lack of imagination. That when we saw someone who had a mental health issue, when we saw a crime being done or there was an issue in our neighborhoods, we didn't call the church or the school or the community center, we called the prisons. And so we fed the prison system and created this large conglomerate. And so that's why the prison system is feeding off and working as constructed. But the point is that we want to get to a point where we can eliminate prisons all along, but that takes a process. And so from our abolitionist friends, I would say continue to push and continue to remind us that this fight is not just for only bail reform, but it's to eliminate the entire system as it exists. But we got time to figure that part out.
This is better. And better is better.
Thank you.
So I kind of wanted to build on that a little bit. My name's Jamie. So with the advent of risk assessment and algorithms that are being used in our communities that are basically measuring our threat level, like in LA we have a program that's called LASER, and they use our past historic crime data to measure our risk in communities. How are we engaging in legitimizing risk assessment tools, legitimizing this culture of viewing us as risk levels? We're seeing algorithms and these risk assessment tools being pushed in multiple facets. So I guess my concern is that are we legitimizing it, and then how are we being sure that the bias is actually being taken out? So I guess I wanted to know, because I know with the Arnold tool and Compass, there was definitely a demonstration that racial bias was there, but how is the push being, are we looking at what tools are going to be used, and how is that tool going to be functional? And there's also discussion that as people are being released, that the tool is being adjusted if too many people are being released. So how are we monitoring that, and then also trying to safeguard that, but then also, you know, we're kind of pushing ourselves into this culture where we are all now not individuals, but we're all levels of risk, threats to the state. So I think there's two things, like a cultural kind of component that's happening that we're legitimizing if we do use risk assessment tools, but at the same time looking at how they function with the variables that they use and the way that they can be altered, because a lot of algorithms that we know too that's used in predictive policing, we cannot see how they're being used. So this bias that we want to control is necessarily, we're not able to, and then if they can adjust the score of who they're going to release, do we end up getting back into the same predicament that we are right now?
So I mentioned earlier that there's an agency that's sort of going to supervise, as the bill is now, is going to supervise the pretrial services agencies in every county. And so the bill outlines factors that can and cannot be included in the risk assessment tool. And as it stands now, I don't think that there is a tool, I don't know if you agree with me, that complies with the regulations that are in the legislation. Like the legislation cuts out most
I mean,
things.
it has all these lofty goals, like
The
it can't,
mass,
yeah, it can't.
So the legislation really is looking to the future to try and really develop this tool that is unbiased. And
Yeah, and it will be open source, so it
Yeah.
won't be one of those that you can't see what's in it. It
Yeah.
will have to be something that's developed by, like not developed by a private corporation. So those are some safeguards.
And I know it's requiring data analysis to see if there are racial disparities in how it's being implemented. But I also really understand your concerns. I read a book called Weapons of Mass Destruction, which is all about the pervasive use of algorithms. Algorithms are really scary. And after I read that, I had sort of a crisis when we were doing our presentation as to whether, like, we should recommend using risk assessments as the better option. And I think, sort of to your point about prison abolition is the end goal, it is better than the system that we have now. So it's movement forward.
And there are, I mean, like I mentioned, DC, where they have a 90% release rate. So we should push to make California a state that's going to operate under a 90% release rate. Like we should not we should not expect these risk assessment tools, like you said, just to be used to maintain like a 40% release rate. So we should be using them really sparingly and trying to release like the strong majority of people.
I think there's also a movement towards switching the rhetoric from a risk perspective to a needs perspective. And I think that could be good moving forward in terms of like, this person needs help getting to court. This person needs help with court reminder calls, things like that, and implementing the support aspect of it just to ensure that someone's successful on pretrial release is important.
All right. Thank you. I have time for one more question. And then we'll go ahead and part and have lunch, which will be in Deneve, by the way, where many of us just migrated from.
So I'm from the Youth Justice Coalition, and I've been lobbying with you guys one time, I remembered, for this bill. But I just want to see it as how can we reflect this into like youth, you know? When you go to juvenile, you don't bail out. You're stuck in there. So you're still stuck in there to your regular life, like school, example, work. Because I know as a teenager, I had 2 jobs and I had to work. So if I would have got in trouble, I would have been like, damn, like my family is really suffering because I'm providing them, and then I'm even suffering myself because I want to succeed to get my high school diploma, and now I'm stuck in here on their timing, when they're going to take me to school, and when am I going to get all these resources. But yeah, like how would we reflect that as well to youth? I mean, it might be a short-term goal, a long-term goal, I wouldn't know.
For youth, I think the goal around youth is to just decriminalize being young, period. And so Senator Holly Mitchell and Shirley Weber have introduced a package of bills that are dealing with criminalization of youth. It's just saying that we need to do away with the criminalization of youth, period. And parole and probation and all that needs to not apply to our young folks because, you know, teens should be teens and kids should be kids, and they should have opportunities, and that their zip codes and their skin color shouldn't be a liability to them. And so Senator Holly Mitchell's working on that with Shirley Weber, and organizations that are just now coming around and trying to look at that. And you know, at You Justice Coalition, that they showed up big for Justice LA. And so we're working together to figure out what it looks like just to decriminalize being young, period. Like that shouldn't be, you know, a society is judged about how you treat your children. And so if we are locking up our kids, then that says that our society has a moral bankruptcy that we need to deal with.
All right, thank you, thank you. Give our panelists a round of applause, please. I'm not, or will everybody be around afterwards?
Sure. A little bit.
For a little bit. Yeah, so if you have questions, see them before they take off.